happening? What's happening? This is issue 7. Right, so it's not been long actually since I recorded issue 6. I kind of wanted to at first I wanted to do like a continuation of issue 6 based upon the idea of, if I remember correctly, like us as humans, how us individually make up like a bigger picture, and that bigger picture maybe being like God or the celestial being, or like, I don't know, something bigger, like, or maybe Earth is like a being in itself, you could say, and that's what we compromise, but we don't understand it properly. But actually, as it starts raining, so let me be right back. Right, cool. So as I was saying before, yeah, I wanted it to be a continuation of issue 6 because I felt like there was still a few things that I didn't really articulate properly, like my ideas and stuff that was going on in my head. But I kind of wanted to sit and talk about a few different things though, do you know what I mean? So the reason being is because I was listening to the podcast between Joe Rogan and Graham Hancock. For you lot who don't know who Graham Hancock might be, they call him a pseudoscientist archaeologist, right? And he, or like his primary work that quite a lot of people know him for is the work on the Younger Dryas period, which is basically just about lost ancient civilizations that were sophisticated civilizations that lived way beyond the history of what we're told, of what mainstream science and mainstream archaeology tells us, which is that his Younger Dryas theory is that there were actually ancient civilizations and sophisticated civilizations way before 12,000 years ago, which is what the Younger Dryas period marks, which was basically just a massive global catastrophe that was almost like a reset. So yeah, if you don't really know too much about it and you ain't too clued up on it, therefore go listen to his work, watch his documentary on Netflix, Ancient Apocalypse, top tier. You learn a lot more and you understand a lot more about what the Younger Dryas period is, what it signifies, and like all the history behind it basically. But that's not really what I wanted to speak about. They were actually discussing, funny enough, quite off topic, the war on drugs. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm an advocate for drugs or give my political view on drugs as such. But they did speak about a few things that were very interesting in terms of the broader idea and the broader aspect and what they signify. And it's something that I have thought about, and I have always thought about, especially from young too, and questioned, which is why do we listen to what the people in positions of power tell us that we need to be doing? Like, why do we listen and do as we're told without thinking and questioning? Do you know what I mean? They use the war on drugs to relate to this topic. So Graham Hancock is a big advocate for psychedelics, for example, and how they alter the state of consciousness, and maybe they take us to a realm of life that we should be living in or adventuring in, and kind of discovering and like going through, because that's what our ancient predecessors did. But for some reason, massive corporate governments who don't understand anything about it tell us that it's bad and that's what we shouldn't be doing, and they ban it, and instead they advocate prescription drugs and pharmaceutical drugs because it's their friends who are making it and it's their friends' businesses. And not only do they advocate it and advertise it, but they glamorize it and they celebrate it almost, when like things like opiates and I don't know, all this other stuff is far worse than what cannabis or psychedelics or any of that sort of stuff is, if that makes sense, and what it does. But anyways, the the argument here that I'm trying to make is that, yeah, I feel like this is something that I can relate to and something that I can agree to. From young, I always questioned, like I said, like, why do we just do as we're told and don't question? Why is it that, I don't know, for stealing, for example, we're made to go in prison and like we have to serve these sentences of time just in isolation? It's like, why do I have to just give myself into doing these things? Why do I have to agree with what we're just told on surface level? Like, why is it that we don't question and like don't figure out for ourselves and make our own decisions about things? And yeah, I guess that can stem deeper, and one of the things that, again, Graham Hancock questions is like, why is it that we're told we can and can't use certain substances when it's proven and it's known that, for example, psilocybin is a massive cure for mental diseases and mental traumas and all this sort of stuff, for anxiety, depression, for, I don't know, all these things. It's a known cure, but they're banned substances. And his argument is that us as adults should be able to make our own decisions and make our own choices of what we do, especially with ourselves. And again, I think I am, would you say, in concord? I agree with that quite a lot, with that way of thinking, that we should be the masters of our own choices rather than having people in positions of power delegate us to do certain things which they themselves don't even understand, and they themselves don't and are not proven to be experts in that particular field. Do you know what I mean? I feel like I'm waffling here, but there's a point. There's a point to all this. There's a point to all this. And us as humans, every day we are compelled to make choices. We are required to formulate decisions, big and small. Do you know what I mean? And that could be as simple as, do I go gym today or not? Or that can be as big as, do I refuse to take this job or accept it? That could be even bigger as to be, do I today walk away from a relationship or not? Do you know what I mean? Like, every day we're compelled to make choices. What do I cook for breakfast? What do I cook for lunch? What do I cook for dinner? What am I gonna wear today? These are all choices, and all these choices have consequences. And all these choices have consequences. So it's incredibly important that we are very aware of what consequences come with what choices and what decisions. Do you know what I mean? And this is, again, something that's also addressed in the Bible, and also just a bigger picture of the Bible and what it represents. That your actions have consequences, and that's something that you will feel, something that you will be a recipient of, whether you like it or not. Do you know what I mean? And that's also why Jesus was given to us, because he came and he showed us how to live a good life, how to make the right choices, how to do the right things in order for us to not suffer so unnecessarily and so imprudently because of our imprudence, if that makes sense. I hope I'm saying that correctly. So funny enough, today I was reading Mark 9, and again, just before I go into this, like, I don't read the Bible because I'm some diehard Christian or Catholic. No, like, I read it because it's a book of wisdom. There's so much knowledge in here, and I do it because I want to learn, and I do it because I want to improve and grow, which is part of what Mark 9 is, it was a good reminder of why I'm doing what I'm doing. And basically the overall message, the overall idea of what Mark 9 is sort of like a small representation of how you should be living day to day, and how you can grow and become better as an individual. So it starts off by saying most men or most people on earth will never get a taste of death until God comes in all his power, basically. And like with all his kingdom, man comes and gets you. And basically what he's trying to say is, is that not many people are going to know what it's like to sacrifice or kill the version of yourself that you are now and leave that behind in order to grow and in order to build and in order to make a new version of yourself that is better than the old and the last. And that's what the taste of death signifies. You are sacrificing essentially, you are killing essentially the version of yourself that you are today, because you know, or you have accepted rather, and your pride and your ego doesn't get in the way of the fact that you are not perfect, you don't have it all figured out, and there's still things that you can improve on. Do you know what I mean? So these are things that it addresses. As Mark 9 goes on, it says, if I can recall correctly, but I can definitely recall what the overall message was and like a few bits and bobs in there. But essentially, it's you can't let your ego and pride get in the way of thinking, of knowing and accepting that you are not perfect, that you don't know everything, and that there's so much more that you need to learn, and that with what you think you already know now, it's not enough. Do you know what I mean? Oh, sorry. I feel like I need to cough and I'm holding back a cough. That's not gonna sound nice in the video. So what happens is, here's what happens. Jesus takes three of the disciples, Mark, John, Matthew, I think it is, maybe Luke, I'm not too sure, up into the mountains. And when he's up in the mountains, he kind of like transforms a little bit, and his clothing goes white as anything. Like nothing on earth can make his clothes go white, basically how it did, and it was just glorious and magnificent. And it appeared Moses, and appeared, I think it was Isaac, and Jesus was there with Moses and Isaac, and he was talking to them, and he was revealing many things to the chosen disciples that came up to the mountain. And the disciples, like, they got a little bit scared and intimidated by what was going on, because they've never seen this before, they've never experienced it before, and they didn't know what to do. So they went back to doing what they know what to do, which was just basically building like a monument to signalize, or like to building a monument to basically just put like a little stamp to say this is what happened over here, innit? So they asked Jesus, yo, Jesus, we don't know what to do, can we just build like a monument basically to cherish this moment, to embellish this moment here on the top of this mountain? And then as he said that, clouds came over, a thunderous voice came out from the skies and was just like, this is my son, just listen. All you got to do is just listen. And then when obviously the voice went away and the disciples looked around, Moses and Isaac had disappeared. It was just Jesus left, and then they had to come down from the mountain. So what does that mean, or what does that signify? Well, it's quite clear and it's quite simple if you really, really think about it. Many times there's a common theme that occurs in the Bible of going up into the mountains. And what does that mean? It probably means being in a state of grace where you're receiving so much knowledge and wisdom and so much free game, do you know what I mean? And sometimes this free game and this knowledge and this wisdom that you're acquiring, these experiences that you are like being put through, and these like new things that you are seeing and feeling, and like, I don't know what it might be, because they're so new and it's like nothing you've ever seen before. Yes, they might be beautiful experiences, marvelous experiences, how, you know, Jesus' clothes was just shining white so brightly, must have been such a beautiful sight, right? But because they're so new, and because they're so magnificent, and because they're so brilliant in a way, yeah, it can be intimidating and it can be quite scary. Do you know what I mean? Especially if it's something you've never seen or experienced before. And in doing so, I think it's very easy for human nature to take over. And what does that look like? It's yourself kind of going back to what you know, or what you think you know, and using that to comprehend and to understand what's going on in front of you. And if you only use what you know, and if you only relate back to the things that you know and your knowledge, wisdom, whatever it might be, to try to understand and comprehend something that's something you've never understood before, the cloud comes over, you know what I mean? Like your judgment's quite clouded, or the experience becomes quite clouded. You occult what you're supposed to actually be learning, and like what you're actually supposed to be experiencing and gaining from this experience too. So that's why the voice in the sky says, "This is my son, just listen." In that moment, you're only just supposed to like sit in, learn, and absorb. Do you know what I mean? You're only supposed to just take in what is being given to you, and you're not supposed to, I don't know, let your ego and let your pride get in the way of thinking that you already know and how to deal with these new experiences. You already know what these things mean, because then you kind of just miss the whole point. You know what I mean? You kind of miss the whole point there. And then after that, Jesus basically tells them that you have a due responsibility. You have a due responsibility to bear your own cross now, to bear the responsibility of being a better person and fixing everything that's wrong with yourself and, you know, outside of yourself within means, right? Like, that's your responsibility. Like, you need to essentially take and bear the cross of having to improve yourself as much as you possibly can, and not remaining idle, and also not falling into the trap of thinking that someone's gonna come and fix all the problems on earth so I don't have to do it. Because that way of thinking also gets in the way and also doesn't allow you to grow as a person, and also makes you actually quite bitter and quite sour. No one really likes that, you know what I mean? And he says, well, how do you do that? The disciples ask him, like, how did you, how, I don't get it. Or like, give me like a little bit more free game, basically. And Jesus says to him, or to them, that the only way in order for you to basically heal and grow and become bigger and better and to improve yourself is through prayer and fast. Now, what does prayer and fast look like? So, you know, there's the common interpretation that prayer is just simply go into your room, closing your eyes, putting your hands together and saying, God, please make me better. I'm repeating that with a few other repetitions of prayers and then basically just leaving it in God's hands and not doing anything about it. And that is the most, I think, terrible and delusional way of interpreting what prayer is supposed to be. Prayer is conversation with God. Prayer is supposed to be speaking to your inner self and your inner voice and reasoning and being logical and figuring out answers and brainstorming, because that's how ideas are planted into your head. And who plants those ideas? That's God, and that's how you speak to God. So prayer is actually internal dialogue, a lot of internal dialogue, and you have to ask questions when you pray. You can't just make a statement and that's it. You have to ask questions and you have to look for the answers of those questions. And sometimes they may not appear to you just like that in your prayers. They may appear to you actually through action and through, you know, the things that you do day to day and all that sort of stuff. So prayer is internal dialogue with yourself and God. You have to ask questions, you have to look for the answers, and you have to have that internal dialogue. It's simply not good enough to say, God, please make me a better human. Amen. You have to ask yourself, what am I doing at the moment that's stopping me from being a better human? What are the things that inhabit me, that are inhabitors to me becoming better? What are some of the actions that pull me away from that? What are some of the actions that bring me towards that? What are some of the things that I do good? Where are the areas that I lack? Where are the areas that I excel? What can I do tomorrow that makes me that little bit better than what I was today? What does better look like? What does a better human look like? How can I define what a better human is? How can I define what doing good is? You know what I mean? You have to ask yourself these questions and you have to answer them. There's no good, again, just saying, God, please make me better. Amen. It doesn't work that way. And what's fasting? Fasting is the idea of delaying gratification, delaying instant gratification. You knuckle down and you do the work, you do the hard work, you do everything necessary, the inputs necessary, the required effort, to, I don't know, if it was to be a better person, to be a better person. And fasting, the reason why it's called fasting is because you're not going to see instant results. You can't just change your actions from one day to the next and see instant results. It's things that you got to chip away at, you got to work constantly at. So that means for the period that you're working towards that goal, the period that you're working towards moving towards that goal, you might not necessarily get the rewards and the success that you and the achievements that you are looking for. So in that period, you're basically putting in the work with no sort of incentive to carry on, if that makes sense, because you're not receiving no rewards. And that's the fasting period. That's what fasting is. So prayer and fasting, constant internal dialogue and being self analytical and critical, and then doing the necessary work after you get those answers in order to keep on improving, to keep on improving, to keep on improving, to keep on improving. And during those periods, you might not receive your rewards, but you will in the end. So that's another thing. And he also tells them it's not just that, you also have to almost be childlike. So he says, if one of the, so he puts like a little infant in front of the disciples and he said, if you receive the one of these little children in my name, you will receive me. And not only will you receive me, but you will receive him who sent me to. So what does that mean? What does that mean? Because before that, he tells them, because the disciples were arguing amongst themselves, and when Jesus would ask, what was you lot arguing about? They wouldn't say, but Jesus knew that they were arguing about who is going to be the greatest man. So Jesus says to them, if your desire is to be the greatest man, not only will you come last, but you also be a slave to man. So what do them two things have to do in common with trying to be the greatest man and being childlike? It's quite paradoxical actually, because you're supposed to be mature and you're supposed to be a great man, no? But here's the issue with trying to be the best and the greatest man, is that you only ever look at your brethren as your competition. You only ever look as your brother and sister as somebody that you need to beat, somebody that you need to better, someone that you need to one up. And the issue with that, is that it's never ending, and there's always going to be someone that's better than you. There's always going to be someone that has that little bit more than you. There's always going to be someone that's just, I don't know, going to be above you, no matter how many people you surpass. So you become a slave to that. You become a slave to beating the next man, finding the next man, beating the next man, finding the next man, beating the next man. And why is it that you come last? Well, not only is it because you never come first, it's a given, but it's also because you consistently compare yourself to other people, and that means that because you're always going to find someone that's better than you, you're never satisfied with where you are at the moment, or you're never happy with the journey that you've just literally just taken and gone on. You're never happy with the results that you have achieved in, putting in all this graft. You're never content, you're never satisfied, ever. And that's why you come last. You always think that you are not worthy of something, that you're not the best, that you always think that you're not good enough, you always think that, I don't know. So it's that idea that if you are going to undertake making changes and trying to better yourself and trying to be the best version of yourself, don't do it because you're trying to better the next man. Do it from a childlike state of mind. And that's why Jesus told you to accept the little one. And what does that mean, and what does that look like? Well, think about it. What are children like? What are children's nature? They play, they learn, they're constantly improving and growing. They enjoy their time and they look to play and always be involved with other kids. So you can boil it down to three things: learn, improve, and enjoy yourself. Be playful and have fun within that process. And not only is it that, but if you're able to do those three things successfully, well, part of play is playing with other people. So now you're actually helping other people grow too. You're working with other people, you're being cohesive and you're being collaborative with other people. And, the same way you help them, they're helping you. And that's also another thing that Jesus touches upon when he's telling the disciples about learning and growing and improving. And he says to also be very wise and prudent of the things that stop you from allowing to be in that mindset of positive growth, of learning because you genuinely want to learn, improving because you just genuinely want to become a better version of yourself, not because you want to better the next man, and being playful with it and enjoying your time with it and helping those around you as you help yourself, to cut off the things that stop you from being like that, basically, no matter how much it might hurt, because then you'll fall into the trap of the other thing, which is looking to looking to one up other people, being sour with your own development because you don't think you're getting what you deserve, or you're not growing far enough, and blah blah blah. So why am I bringing this up? Because I feel like I went around in quite a long circle there. But why am I bringing this up? Why am I talking about this and also talking about the government controlling us? Well, it's simple. The main way in which we learn, the main way in which us humans improve and advance is by making our own decisions, by making mistakes, by going back and analyzing what action did I make that was that was consequential to this outcome. What input did I put in that brought out this negative output, and how can I do that differently so that the output isn't negative? So it's basically, in essence, making your own choices, making and making and cementing your own decisions, and like carrying out those actions and figuring out what happens once you do it, so that next time you know what not to do or what to do, and next time you know, I want to try this improvement, maybe I want to try this thing a little bit differently, and maybe it might come out better. Do you know what I mean? So it's trial and error. So essentially, you have to be able to make your own choices, because trial and error really and truly is probably the main way in which we learn. And if you have massive bodies and massive governments or massive governing figures that tell you you can't do certain things, then they're already limiting what your choices can be. They're already limiting your decisions, basically. And what if half of the choices and decisions that they have put limitations are upon, are actually essential to your growth and essential to your self improvement? Do you know what I mean? Because this was something that I had a conversation with my friend Carlos not too long ago, that living within the city limits, I feel like it's so limiting, funny enough. And it's very reducing to what it offers and what you can and can't do. Like when you live in a city, you're just reduced to basically making as much money and as wealth as you possibly can in order to survive. And what kind of a life is just chasing materialistic and superficial reward? Do you know what I mean? Like, what kind of a life is that? I don't really think it's much of a life, man. I really don't think it is. Because when you think about it, in a city, there's no nature. You don't need to actually acquire skills to thrive in nature. You don't need to really and truly farm your own fruit and veg. You don't need to farm your own herbs. You don't need to know what signs in the sky mean in terms of weather. You don't need to know what, like, I don't know, like animals migrating might signify for you, like what that's a signal of. Like you don't need to know any of these things. The only thing you need to know really and truly when you live in a city is how much money can I make in order to buy the things that I need. So you're already like simplified and you're already reduced to just being money making machines, literally. And I don't know, man, it's just such a sad life for me to even think about. And then on top of that, like the perks that you get with your jobs, you only get 30 days out of 365 in a whole entire year for yourself. Okay, fair enough, not including weekends and maybe a few bank holidays, but even then it might go up to what? Do the maths. God knows that 50 days on top of the 30, maybe a little bit more. But that's horrible, man. That's terrible, bruv. Nobody should ever live like that. Nobody should ever live like that. You are required for most of your day to be in an office or in your workplace, basically making money for that business, for somebody else, basically, for so that somebody else can make money. Most of your day is literally spent and wasted on that. You don't actually do, no real living, no real like attaining of useful wisdom and knowledge. There's none of it, bruv. Fair enough, you might attain the wisdom and the knowledge of how to analyze numbers and how to, like, I don't know, code, or like how to like work your part in a massive clockwork of making money for somebody else. Great, but like really and truly, what good and what benefit does that do to you? Nothing, nothing at all. So yeah, I just kind of feel like that's probably one of the main reasons why I've never agreed with like governments, and like never agreed with half of the things that I see around me, like office buildings. I used to walk past office buildings. I used to think to myself, bruv, why do people feel so compelled to want to have the best job in an office just to make money for somebody else so that they can get rich? And like, these jobs are just made up jobs that are like made up responsibilities for people to do. Like, why do you think it's such a responsibility upon yourself to do the numbers, or like to do data analytics for somebody else's company just because they want to get rich? Like, what makes you think that's such an important thing to do? Or what makes you think that's such a like successful achievement? It's a made up job in a made up like company that just decided one day they wanted to do broken like ship broken for shipping containments and like all this, that, and the next. And it's like, I just don't know, man. I understand the logistical side of it, and like, yes, like, fair enough, we might need ships in order to transport goods around the world, and like, yeah, it's nice, it works great. But like, again, even just having ships that transports goods around the world kind of already stops you from making your own goods and like understanding nature and how nature can provide for you and how nature can give you so much in abundance, rather than relying on money, superficial materialistic things in order to attain more shores. You know what I mean? I don't know, man. But again, it's tough. The way the world is built doesn't allow you to live such a natural life. Although you say that, and there are thriving tribes and thriving communities that live within nature. That's a different story. So yeah, I've just never really been in accordance with mainstream ways of living, just accepting what we're told because that person happens to be your prime minister, who probably doesn't know the majority of the things he's making a decision on, and he's only making that decision or making a decision because it either benefits himself or his friends that are around him. It just baffles me. So I've never really agreed with that. I think it does limit our capability of making decisions and choices. I think it also does dumb us down and doesn't actually make us um masters of our own will, if you must. And I genuinely do believe that it's probably not the right way we should be living, and that's why we haven't really made advancements as humans and as a civilization. Like, even little things, bro. Think about it. People have designed engines that run on water. People know how to make sustainable energy. Nikola Tesla supposedly formulated and discovered how we can have free and wireless energy. But because of greed, and because it doesn't benefit anyone if it's free, and because no one can make money out of it, and because, I don't know, like, because there's no selfish, materialistic, and superficial gain and desire that it fulfills, it got banned and like it just got destroyed. And instead we have to continue living off of fossil fuels and, I don't know, nuclear energy and these sustainable energies that ain't sustainable only because it profits the people that run it. Do you know what I mean? Man, I genuinely do believe we live in an era that is unfortunately governed and powered by greed and corruption and power. I genuinely do not believe that we live a in a moment in time where the world is governed more by wanting to help everybody and wanting to make this place a better world to live in, and that overpowers greed, money, and power. And rather it's the other way around, that we live in a world where money, power, and greed controls everything, and corruption, and unfortunately the desire to want to do better and want to help those that are around you and live in a much more cohesive and harmonious world is far less. And that's not to say, by the way, that like I hate this world, I hate this planet, you know what I mean? Far from it. I still think that within our dark and twisted world, there's so many beautiful things. We've been able to experience so many amazing things, and I actually quite enjoy living the life that I live, despite obviously me coming out with these crazy statements and making these crazy observations, you might say. Not conclusions, they're not conclusions, but observations, you might say. Um, yeah, like I don't hate my life for any minute. I really don't think that like I detest this world. I don't picture myself kind of with that mindset at all. I actually quite rather enjoy living and enjoy experiencing. I enjoy learning now from all my experiences, because that's something that I never used to do before, man. When I was younger, and this was fairly recently too, possibly less than a year ago, um, I really thought that like, yes, my actions had consequences, but once the action is made and the consequences apparent, I don't need to go back and think about what I done and change things for the better, or at least really make an effort to change things for the better. I kind of just left it in God's hands, if you will, and just expected him to do it for me. But that's just not really how it works, and that's not the case, is it? So, um, I'm really enjoying the process of this self-internal dialogue, and like being very analytical and being very critical and being completely honest with myself. And I have gotten things wrong, and I have, you know, unfortunately made the wrong choices. And looking back, I'm thinking, right, this is what I could have done better. So in the future, this is what I will do better. I'm really taking it upon myself to do that. Do you know what I mean? And I'm really enjoying that process, because now I feel like I'm living. Now I feel like I'm learning. Now I feel like I'm starting to move in the right direction. And wait, I would not change that for the world. And I really, really, really wouldn't want that outlook on life to change either. Do you know what I mean? Um, but yeah, man, this is why I think I have such a strong desire to get out of the city now and go live like in rural areas, or like within nature, and like just live somewhere that's a little bit more isolated and away from city structures, and away from city infrastructures as well, and just also like away from being so heavily impacted by governmental decisions and bureaucracy and all that sort of stuff, because then I have the freedom to make my own choices. And maybe I might have the freedom to make choices which government people tell me I can't make. And maybe I might be able to then actually learn a thing or two even more and even deeper, and gain more wisdom and more knowledge that way, because I am making my own choices fully. And I am, being responsible for making sure that if they are bad choices that I have made, I'm better in them now and I'm learning something from it. And if they are good choices, well, then continuing to add on to that. Do you know what I mean? Um, so yeah, like these were crazy thoughts and crazy like just things that I was thinking about as I was listening to the podcast with Joe Rogan and Graham Hancock, and also reading Mark 9, and yeah, just thinking while I was doing some stuff, man. Yeah. So that's kind of like what I wanted to speak about today in issue 7. I think they're very interesting things. I think everybody needs to learn and have the capability of being uh, uh, a self thinker, a free thinker, sorry, is what I was looking for. Everybody needs to have that capability of being a free thinker, not just believing what you're told because that's what seems like it could be the right answer. Because again, as history shows, like half of the time when you're told something is correct, it sometimes doesn't tend to be correct, and then it's just kind of like, oh, it was kind of misled here a little bit, like maybe this ain't the right thing to do. So I think it is incredibly important that everybody has the capability to think for themselves, to question everything that they're told, to question everything that happens on in their life too, not just what they're told but what they experience. Question it, look back and think to yourself, like, why did this happen? Why did this work? Why did this not work? Like, everybody should have the ability to be a free thinker, and in doing so everybody should have the ability to form their own ideas and beliefs. Obviously, to a certain extent, let's just make sure that they're not incredibly like irrational and radical. And yeah, like everybody should have that ability, man. And everybody should really and truly um make choices of their own in order so that they can learn and just not do what they're spoon fed to eat and chew. Do you know what I mean? just to not simply open their mouth and receive it. They should look at it first and be like, is that actually really good for me? You know what I mean? So yeah, man, those were a few things that I just kind of wanted to discuss today. Think about and just, I don't know, yeah, maybe just kind of explore a little. Not to say that any of what I said is completely correct and true, but it's just ideas that go on in my head, man, and it's just good to kind of get them out in words and articulate them. And I don't know, maybe someone might resonate with that, and if they do, feel free to somehow hit me up and maybe we can sit and discuss. You know what I mean? I'd love to do that, man. I need to get more guests on the show, but it's tough. It's tough getting a lot of free thinkers to come on here and just really discuss and openly discuss. And I think also the art of conversing is very, very difficult as well. Although people might not think it might seem. I think it is. In order to really sit down and have a good conversation, it is. But yeah, man, I think that's probably where we can conclude issue 7. It's been an interesting one. Wasn't what I expected from issue 7, but I think it was definitely a very good one, though. Very good one. And I hope these guys took a lot away from that. Don't just believe everything you're told. Question everything you're told that you should be doing, and formulate your own thoughts, make your own decisions, make your own choices, make your own and formulate your own ideas. Have your own beliefs and don't just believe what you're told to believe. And make sure you're always looking back, sacrificing the current version of yourself in order to become a better version of yourself. And don't do it because you want to be better than the next man. Do it because you genuinely want to learn, grow, and improve. It's a good way to conclude issue 7. It's a very good way to conclude issue 7.